As the moon orbits the Earth, it casts a shadow into space. Every so often, the sun and the moon line up and the shadow brushes the Earth. A small dot of blackness only a few dozen miles wide advances across the surface, favoring everyone in its path with a total solar eclipse. And in August 2017, the little town of Madras, Oregon, was directly in its path. I departed at 4:30 a.m. for the 9-hour drive to Madras, with the waning crescent moon showing the way. I left on Thursday, 5 days before the eclipse, to beat the crowds that were sure to descend on Madras. And it worked. The highways were as quiet as could be, until I got to the campsite around 2 p.m. There was a lineup. A long lineup. A long lineup. I have never seen a lineup like this in my life, and I hope to never see another. It took an entire afternoon of moving a bit and stopping, turning the car off and waiting, turning the car on again and moving a bit more, over and over and over again. After 5 hours of this, I finally arrived at the Solartown campsite where I would be spending the next few days. Solartown was established on a farmer's field north of Madras, in the shadow of one of those huge irrigators whose tracks ran through the campsite. At first I couldn't figure out what the adjacent crop was. I'd never seen anything quite like it. But I soon realized they were growing carrot seeds. Apparently there's more money in the seeds than in the carrots. Despite the incredible lineup on Thursday, the field seemed huge and almost empty on Friday morning. But over the course of the next few days, more and more people arrived, until by Sunday it was teeming with campers. There were hundreds of pre-pitched tents for people without camping equipment, and another field further north was used as a parking lot for people who came with just their cars the night before the eclipse. I was really impressed with the organization of the campsite. There were plenty of porta potties, a good supply of water for the people who were tenting, outdoor sinks, and, get this, ATM machines. Everything was regularly serviced, and every morning a water truck came round to help keep the fire hazard down. They even had showers, but by Sunday afternoon they were closed because the trucks couldn't get through to empty the greywater tanks, so I had to make do on my own. And by the morning of the eclipse, the lineups for the porta potties had gotten a little out of hand. People had come from far and wide for the opportunity to see the first North American eclipse in almost 40 years. Most were from the western half of the continent, but I saw a few cars from the East Coast and even from as far abroad as Alaska and Hawaii. There were all kinds of telescopes on display, and these weren't just for the eclipse. The deep, dark night skies of Madras were an astronomer's delight. The campsite was across the highway from the airport, and there was an almost constant stream of parachutes coming down from the sky. There were even some people jumping out during the eclipse itself. And when I saw these jets in the distance, my thought was, wow, look at all the lineup of flights coming into Madras. But when I got a closer look at them, I realized they were just a bunch of cannibalized 727s. There was a hot air balloon at the campsite, and in the mornings they took passengers up on a tethered flight to get a better view of the area. So on Sunday I bought a ticket, waited in line of course, and hopped on board. Up we went, all 30 or 40 feet or so, and this is what I saw. More tents and campers than I have ever seen assembled in one place. There was a large collection of food trucks in the corner of the campsite, and although there was quite a variety of food, it seemed to me that gravy was a particular theme. Over the course of my stay, I partook of their fare on a couple of occasions, and there was even a beer tent for those so inclined. I couldn't believe the morning lineups at those food trucks, for coffee, of course, and in the heat of the day, it was the shaved ice truck that got all the love. And the days were hot. This fellow found a nice spot to keep cool in the back of an ice truck. But despite the heat, the air was dry, bug-free, and pretty windy, at least for the first few days. So I was able to leave the van doors open and get a great flow of fresh air. I spent much of my time reading the books I brought with me, but I took a few trips into town during the first couple of days before the lines for the shuttle bus got out of hand. The bus was a great place to experience the camaraderie of Eclipse goers, and the drivers were friendly and full of laughs.
My boss is my wife, unfortunately. like the rest of life.
The fairgrounds hosted a solar fest with booths for souvenirs, art, and of course food. I succumbed to this truck selling funnel cakes. I'm sure that this one indulgence alone set my diet back at least a few days' worth. There was a map so people could show where they came from, and it clearly showed the global interest in the event. Evidence of the eclipse could be seen throughout the town, and lots of vendors popped up to hawk their wares. I had expected Madras's lone cell tower to be swamped by the flood of visitors, but they had actually set up a temporary cell tower, and while connections were often sluggish, the only time I actually lost service was for a few hours right after the eclipse. I woke up early each morning to catch the moon as it preceded the sun into the brightening sky. First, it rose above Venus as a thin crescent. The next day, it rose below Venus, an even thinner crescent with brilliant earthshine. And the day before the eclipse, it was the thinnest crescent I have ever seen, set for a rendezvous with the sun in a mere 29 hours. A benefit of these early morning sojourns was the incredible sunrises, which complemented the equally spectacular sunsets.
So this is it. The day of the big eclipse, Monday, August the 21st, has finally arrived.
The media is out in force, and the newscasters are filing their reports from the air as well as from the ground.
So it's 8:50 and just about less than 20 minutes before the partial phase of the eclipse starts. And I got all my camera equipment set up here. I've got the camera that I'm going to use to record the sort of general things that are going on, what I'm doing in the eclipse. I've got the camera I'm going to use to shoot the totality portion of the eclipse. I've got the camera here that's got the tracking mount, and in about 5 minutes I'm going to start to the time lapse of the entire eclipse. And then I've got my little RX100 here that I'm going to use to do a time lapse of the whole thing, and in fact it's shooting the time lapse right now. So we're just about ready to start, and so we'll see what we get. Getting some nice sun pictures here, and the sun actually has some sunspots on it today. And that makes for a nice, more interesting sun as the eclipse progresses.
Lots of people are up on the roofs of their RVs waiting for the start of the eclipse.
Okay, the little beeping means that the partial phase of the eclipse has begun. So we should slowly see the sun being bitten into by the moon over the next hour until it completely disappears. Is it there yet? Is it there yet?
Oh, there it is. It's coming. It's actually happening.
What can you see?
Nothing.
Well, look at the sun.
I can see the moon creeping in on the sun there.
Oh, yeah?
That looks really cool.
Hold it. Oh my gosh.
It's not the worst design.
Patiently watching the moon slowly slide over the sun.
Well, it's less than 20 minutes until totality, and the light is getting very noticeably dimmer. So it's not long now.
Anticipation is rising in inverse proportion to the dwindling light. But this fellow seems to be playing it pretty cool.
Well, it's less than 10 minutes to totality. It's gotten rather dim and actually rather cool too, so I put my jacket on. Two minutes to go. 2 minutes.
Oh my God, look at that. That is so cool.
Oh, look at Jefferson! It's coming out!
No, too soon.
Encore!
Finish again.
Woohoo! That was amazing. I got some really good footage of the shadow traveling across the sky. I'm really happy about that. And I won't know for sure about my other time lapses until I can actually have a look at them, but I'm very hopeful. And the site itself was, of course, just amazing. Well worth it, and I'm so glad I came.
And with that, things start to wrap up, although the eclipse is still ongoing, and it'll actually take more than an hour for the moon to completely uncover the sun. While that's going on, I get a chance to review the footage I shot during the eclipse. Here's one angle of what I was doing during the eclipse, speeded up by a factor of 15. It's very cool how the light changes as the eclipse goes on. And this is very cool. Watch the clouds in the sky to the east as the shadow of the moon passes overhead. You can actually see it moving right across the sky. And before the moon had even cleared the sun, the exodus had begun. A line of cars wound through the entire campsite, with drivers inching forward bit by bit. The line stretched on down the side road leading from the campsite, everyone intent on trying to get to the highway for the journey home. And the highway itself? Complete gridlock. It was just two endless lines of cars, one in each direction, just sitting there with their engines turned off. The army guys who had been tasked with managing the crowds were powerless to help. Google Maps showed that the traffic jam extended for miles out of town, which is exactly why I planned to stay the extra night. By the evening, the sky had filled with forest fire smoke, so we were very lucky to have had such clear skies for the eclipse. And the campsite still looked to be more than half full, so I decided to steal away in the wee hours the next morning. I pulled out of the campsite around 4:30 in the morning, and I wasn't the only one so inclined. But the roads were blissfully empty, and I had no problems getting gas in town before the uneventful journey home. My Eclipse adventure was a tremendous success, thanks to the great people of Madras who were such good hosts to me and the many thousands of my fellow visitors. Thanks, Madras!